Fame and fortune. They go together, right? Well, not always. Quite a few people with household names lost it all, sometimes in near unbelievable ways.
When you're a famous rock star at the height of your career, the wave of success might seem endless, but everyone knows nothing lasts forever, and many musicians aren't exactly brilliant at saving up that nest egg. Here are the rockers who went completely broke, and a few who clawed their way back. English bad boy rocker Pete Doherty founded the rock band The Libertines in 1997, and when the group banned him from playing due to his drug abuse and jail time, Doherty simply started another band, the Baby Shambles, in 2003.
I long for a mediocre gig.
But his addiction didn't just affect his relationships, it affected his bottom line. In 2007, the Evening Standard reported that despite earning millions with the Libertines and his recent Baby Shambles album selling 100,000 copies, Doherty was, quote, on the verge of bankruptcy. While it was assumed his addictions didn't help financial matters, his investments hadn't done well either, and all the money was seemingly gone.
It was all part of a way of life that I was locked into, you know?
Fortunately, he'd managed to snag supermodel Kate Moss around the way, and her millions were keeping him afloat at the time. But Moss was long gone by 2010 when The Sun claimed that the rocker was, quote, completely broke and living in a basement apartment. Fact or tabloid fiction, Doherty was done. That is, until he formed a new band, Peter Doherty and the Madres. Courtney Love is a successful rocker in her own right, but her real money comes from her late husband Kurt Cobain's publishing rights. Yet she told The Fix that after Cobain died, she lost track of the money, claiming, "I was doing drugs from the moment I woke up till the time I went to bed. I was out of it most of the time." By the time she realized what was happening, she was totally broke. She and daughter Frances moved in with Love's stepfather, and she claims they didn't even have enough money to eat. Then in 2013, according to Clash Music, Love again said she was near bankruptcy because money had been taken from her accounts.
I think betting against me is probably not a good move just because I tend to get what I want.
However, as the outlet noted, there has been controversy over her claims of so-called poverty. In a 2009 court filing, Frances claimed that her mother was obsessed with uncovering fraud and spends much of her day raging about the fraud that has been perpetrated on her. What's definitely true, however, is that Love has trouble paying taxes. The Blast reported that the IRS came after her for non-payment of hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2009, 2011, 2012, and 2016. The last bill was for the largest one yet, over $500,000. When Tom Petty filed for bankruptcy in 1979, it was a strategic choice. Petty was the first artist to figure out how to legally say he had no money to get out of a bad recording contract. As history reported, the music industry is, quote, notorious for its creative accounting practices, and that can mean a very successful act might somehow have no money or perhaps owes their label tons of cash.
This is why people find me difficult sometimes, but it makes perfect sense to me.
Right.
In 1979, Petty found himself with 2 hit albums, numerous hit singles, and what he thought was an unfair cut of the sales due to a bad contract he claims he signed against his will. So he completed a 3rd album, which he financed himself, but refused to let the record company release it. This left him $500,000 in debt, and he filed for bankruptcy. According to Rolling Stone in 1980, Petty's record label sued him and refused to let him perform in concert. Petty filing for bankruptcy and announcing he'd only made $36,000 the previous year was also very embarrassing for the label. Billboard reports this strategy was concerning to the record industry since other artists might follow suit, so the label folded, offering the broke Petty an attractive $3 million contract. In 1984, Mick Fleetwood filed for bankruptcy, which was absurd since he had founded Fleetwood Mac 17 years prior. It's also important to note that according to Paste in 2018, Fleetwood Mac's Rumors was the 7th best-selling album of all time. Part of the problem was that as the drummer, Fleetwood didn't write any of the band's songs, so he made the least amount of everyone, according to The Telegraph. In '84, his lawyer was also quick to point out that Fleetwood was not blowing money on drugs. Or was he?
I never took anything, quote, in the opiate area, booze and cocaine.
But he was definitely up to his neck in real estate. Fleetwood bought and then quickly sold property in Australia and, quote, took a bath on the transactions financially. Then he bought a mansion and took out a huge loan when interest rates were at their peak. As Fleetwood Mac band members took time off for solo projects, his yearly income plummeted to only a couple of $100,000. Then there were the various investments that flopped. In 2014, Fleetwood told The Telegraph he'd lost count of how many times he'd filed for bankruptcy. David Crosby saw huge success with two legendary bands, the Byrds and supergroup Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and sometimes Young.
You know, yes, we did good singing, yes, we did good guitar playing, but the key was we had songs that made you feel something.
But that all fell apart in the 80s. Ultimate Classic Rock reported Crosby's first run-in with the law happened when he crashed his car while on cocaine. He also had a concealed weapon on him. Then just 3 weeks later, he was busted with more cocaine and a gun in a nightclub where he was performing. According to the LA Times, the conviction was overturned on appeal, but then in 1984, Crosby got 3 years probation for driving on a suspended license while drunk. A year later, he crashed his car again and was charged with possession of a concealed pistol and narcotics paraphernalia and hit-and-run driving.
I remember trading a 1939 herringbone dreadnought for substance.
Eventually, Crosby did hard time, with Bankrate reporting that in 1985, he filed for bankruptcy. When he got out of jail, he was so broke he had to live in a friend's spare bedroom and borrow his clothes. In 2003, Crosby told the outlet that he estimated he'd burn through $25 million over the course of his career. He eventually made his money back by continuing to work, but CNN reported that he was arrested for possessing a gun and drugs yet again in 2004. These days, Ted Nugent is known for his opinions on guns, his vocal support of Donald Trump, and even for visiting the White House with Sarah Palin and Kid Rock. But he's first and foremost a successful rock star. He also seemed to care about his money, calling his accountant, quote, kick-ass in a 1979 Rolling Stone interview, saying that the guy got a, quote, sensual thrill out of doing Nugent's books. But in that same interview, the reporter watched Nugent quickly sign a packet of bonus checks for his employees totaling $87,000 in 1979. Nugent claimed he paid everyone handsomely, from his musicians, roadies, agents, and accountants to the farmers on his mink ranch.
And people wonder why I have this attitude.
According to Texas Monthly, within a year of that Rolling Stone interview, Nugent was bankrupt. The mink farm, as well as other esoteric investments like a hotel in Flint, Michigan, and a herd of Clydesdales had been failures. But these days, it seems like he's not dwelling on the past.
I'm having the time of my life, and someday someone will acknowledge that these are some of the greatest rock and roll songs ever written.
In the mid-80s, Twisted Sister was riding high with a quadruple platinum album and crazy music videos that went viral well before YouTube. And Dee Snider, as the main songwriter, was making a ton of money, according to Hard Rock Daddy. But then he was called before the Senate to defend his violent music videos. In order to get politicians on his side, Snider mentioned he was a teetotaling family man who never drank, smoked, or did drugs.
I don't advocate sexism, the use of drugs, and drinking. So I don't write about those things. I only write about things I believe in.
That statement ruined his credibility with his fans, and Twisted Sister was over. Radar Online reported this dramatic fall resulted in Snider filing for bankruptcy. He told Fox News that by 1995 he was, quote, flat broke, claiming that unlike other bankrupt musicians, he didn't have a drug problem or a corrupt manager he could blame for his financial problems. Snider said at that point he couldn't even afford to buy his kids a piece of candy, although thanks to nostalgia and time on Broadway, he's since bounced back financially. When they first started out, the Goo Goo Dolls were so desperate for a record deal they were basically willing to sign any contract. After releasing a couple of albums in the late 80s, the band signed with Metal Blade Records. They would later claim in a lawsuit, according to Billboard, that the company, quote, exploited their naivete and got them to sign an unfair contract, one that saw them, quote, sign away most of their royalty rights. This meant that while they toiled away trying to make it, the band members all still held down part-time jobs. But then in '95, their smash hit album A Boy Named Goo came out. Led by the single Name, it sold millions of copies. The band should have been rolling in it, except the money never came. Each member got a measly $6,000 a year from their label.
Maybe this wasn't such a good idea.
Unable to pay the bills, they went on tour for 2 years. It wasn't always fun for them, like when they joined up with Bush and No Doubt. An experience one member said was like having a dentist enter through your ass to pull your wisdom teeth out. So they sued their label. They won and signed a much better contract, but there were still money issues, like when the drummer left over financial disagreements.
I feel like there's more out there.
Out where?
Everywhere. Whatever's out there, let's find it.
Many rappers try to convey a certain lifestyle of material success. These artists don't want to just talk about watches, jewels, and stacking paper. They also want to walk the walk, too. But it doesn't always work out like that. Here are some big talking rappers who've gone totally broke. For 50 Cent, cash flow at one point seemed to be endless. In 2015, the New York Post reported he'd sold almost 30 million albums, made a reported $60 to $100 million on his investment in vitamin water, had endorsement deals with companies including Reebok and Right Guard, and owned a successful record label and clothing company. The Washington Post estimated his net worth at $500 million in 2010. When 50 Cent filed for bankruptcy in 2015, he was making $185,000 a month, but $72,000 of that went to his 18-bedroom house, which is far from his only monthly expense. While he admitted at the time to have recently bought a Rolls-Royce, he said most of the cars, jewelry, and jets he showed off on social media were actually borrowed or rented. But his big problems came from the illegal stuff he did. As part of a feud he had with rapper Rick Ross, he decided to shame the mother of Ross's child in a truly disgusting way. 50 Cent purchased an adult tape of the woman, added a voiceover making fun of her, and put it online without her knowledge or consent. A judge ordered him to pay $7 million in damages. He was also found guilty of copying his G-Unit headphone design from another company, and a judge made him pay $17 million for that transgression. 50 Cent immediately filed for bankruptcy, saying these judgments plus other debts exceeded his $25 million net worth. According to Rolling Stone, he settled his bankruptcy case in 2016, promising to pay $23 million to his creditors over 5 years. MC Hammer probably had good reason to think the good times would never end. His 1990 album, Please Hammer Don't Hurt 'Em, is one of the best-selling hip-hop albums of all time. Forbes estimates that at the height of his success, Hammer's net worth was around $33 million. But just 6 years after the release of his super successful third album, he filed for bankruptcy in one of the most famous celebrity financial disasters of all time. First, there was the $30 million mansion. Then there were the costs of what is possibly the most epic entourage ever. Hammer employed 200 people on his payroll, reportedly to the cost of $500,000 every month. But Hammer told Oprah Winfrey that the real charge of maintaining such an operation could be, quote, $1 million a month at times. When he filed for bankruptcy, he said he had a 36-page list of several hundred creditors.
There were no books written or no map to follow receiving $20 million or $30 million at one time.
Hammer maintained that he didn't blow the money solely on himself, but rather spread it around to too many other people. Still, in 2011, he told Oprah that he wouldn't go back and change anything, even if he could. He believes in the butterfly effect and that if things had been different, he wouldn't have his kids or the peace that he has now. Lil Kim wasn't lying in her song. It really has been all about the Benjamins for the rapper. Or rather, a lack of them, since she's reportedly had plenty of trouble paying her mortgage. CNBC reports her bank first started foreclosure proceedings on her New Jersey mansion in 2010, and in 2015, the two parties were still trying to work things out. But by 2017, a judge ruled that she'd had her chance. A year later, according to the Los Angeles Times, the bank foreclosed on the property and Kim filed Chapter 13 bankruptcy protection. Besides being over $650,000 behind on her house, she owed the IRS more than $1 million in back taxes. TMZ adds that she was $186,000 behind on legal bills and was $4 million in the hole overall. In 2018, she said she was making about $18,000 a month, but out of that she had to budget $2,000 for her staff, another $2,000 for her wardrobe, and $10,000 for travel. Kim was desperate to save the mansion she bought in 2002 and filed to stop it going to public auction, with the opening bid set at just $100. But the mortgage company said she was still missing payments. Kim had a major setback when the court decided she was in so deep that legally she was too broke to qualify for Chapter 13's specific type of bankruptcy. Bow Wow, formerly Lil Bow Wow, started releasing music when he was 13. Since then, he's had hit records and done some acting, so you'd think he'd have a decent amount of cash saved up over the years. But that couldn't be further from the truth based on what he told a judge in 2012. According to TMZ, during a child custody case, Bow Wow informed the court he made just $4,000 a month and only had $1,500 in his bank account. He also leased a relatively modest car. That might be because 4 years earlier, he leased a Ferrari F430 and within months was behind on payments. The leasing company came for their money and Bow Wow got stuck with a bill of over $200,000. He didn't pay it, and by 2012, interest took the total to almost $300,000. By 2017, he still appeared unable to afford the lifestyle he thought he should project online. The Daily Beast reports that he posted a picture of a private jet on Instagram with a caption heavily implying he was going to fly to New York in it. But then someone saw him flying commercial and posted a picture to Twitter. Another internet detective discovered the picture of the private jet was actually from a Florida company's website. In 2018, he described money as being, quote, evil and claimed he was giving his away to fans. So don't worry about him going broke. Maybe it's all going according to plan. TLC formed in 1991, and by 1994 they had 2 hit albums, 3 #1 singles, and 2 Grammy Awards. But while their professional lives might have been at an all-time high, their personal lives didn't always reflect that. This was especially true for the rapper of the group, Lisa Left Eye Lopes. In the early 90s, Lopes was dating football player Andre Rison, and to outside observers, their relationship was far from functional. At one point, Lopes said Rison abused her, although charges relating to the claims were eventually dropped. On June 8, 1994, Rison and Lopes got into a massive fight in their home. Things reportedly got physical on both sides, leading to Lopes grabbing some of his new sneakers and setting them on fire in a bathtub. The fire got out of control, and soon the whole house was in flames.
We all stopped at once in unison. It's like we all stopped what we was doing, and we looked up. It was black smoke just rolling from under the...
Amazingly, Lopes skated by with a $10,000 fine and probation for an arson charge. Rison even forgave her, and their relationship continued. But the mansion was insured by Lloyd's of London, and they were a lot less forgiving. The Guardian says the $1.3 million claim the company filed against Lopes forced her, and indirectly the rest of the group, into bankruptcy. Nas has had a long and successful career, showing up on the Billboard Hot 100 chart nearly 24 times between 1994 and 2018. He married fellow artist Khalees in 2005, but things went south pretty fast. By 2009, she had filed for divorce while pregnant with their first child. Whatever bad things went on in their marriage, Nas's terrible financial situation became clear during the divorce. Essence says that while settling on the child support amount Nas would contribute, the rapper claimed he owed his manager $700,000 and the IRS millions. But he was still required to pay over $50,000 a month in support. He really might not have had the money, though, because before they were even divorced, Khalees said Nas wasn't fulfilling his obligations. The judge ruled he owed her $300,000 in back child support and alimony, according to DJ Booth. But Nas claimed paying the amount would bankrupt him. His lawyer argued he made, quote, substantially less than the $150,000 Khalees claimed Nas pulled down a month. He had to set up a payment plan to afford the bill. Then, in 2012, Nas lost his Georgia home when he failed to make mortgage payments. The bank took it and sold it at auction. Khalees wasn't the only ex not getting paid either. TMZ reported the mother of Nas's daughter took him to court in 2014 and said he was a repeat criminal non-supporter who owed her more than $11,000 in child support. Fat Joe released 10 albums before his first run-in with the Taxman in 2010. At that time, it was only $105,000 owed to the state of New Jersey, which he was able to pay back before facing major consequences. But by 2012, things had gotten a lot worse. Despite earning over $3 million in 2007 and 2008, Joe decided to not pay the more than $700,000 he owed the IRS on it, according to USA Today. He faced up to 2 years in prison, but before he was sentenced, he worked hard to pay the bill, simultaneously working to shore up his image with charitable donations. Reuters says Joe also accepted the blame, saying while there was, quote, a lot going on the years he failed to file, it was still his responsibility to do so. In addition, more than 60 people sent in letters on his behalf testifying to the quality of his character. Joe still served 4 months in prison. Perhaps the worst consequence of his behavior was that his 6-year-old daughter was taunted in school about her dad going to jail. But his daughter's woes must not have had that much of an effect on him, since in 2016, he once again found himself in hot water with the IRS. This time, he owed $1.1 million. In a 2019 interview, Joe implored young rappers to have a solid business plan and not to repeat mistakes he made, like spending millions of dollars on jewelry and private planes.
I wish somebody I really respected would have really explained to me the importance of budgeting that money right.
Professional athletes seem to have it all: fame, adulation, and riches. But once an athlete retires, it's a different story. It seems hard to believe, but here's a look at some top-tier athletes who lost all their cash. He was an NBA All-Star and an Olympian, but Vin Baker was also an alcoholic. Despite earning nearly $100 million over the course of his career, Baker lost it all. Drinking his way out of the league, Baker's house was foreclosed on, and he eventually sold his gold medal to pay the bills. After hitting rock bottom, though, Baker was able to get sober. He reached out to an old boss, former Supersonics owner Howard Schultz, who offered him a job. Baker told WBUR,
"We met and we came up with a plan, and part of the plan was to make caramel macchiatos and serve coffee at Starbucks."
It doesn't sound like much, but Baker told the Providence Journal it was the chance he needed. "I get energy from waking up in the morning and not depending on alcohol and not being embarrassed or ashamed to know I have a family to take care of. The show's got to go on." Since then, Baker has moved on and up, working with the Milwaukee Bucks as a commentator. Way to go, Vin. In the mid-'80s, no NFL star was bigger than William the Refrigerator Perry, either literally or figuratively. A defensive lineman who moonlighted as the heaviest player to ever score a touchdown, the Fridge was, as one Chicago Sun-Times columnist put it at the time, the best use of fat since the invention of bacon. By 2015, though, Perry had lost both his health and his fortune. According to a Sports Illustrated profile, Perry lives in a retirement home plagued by severe diabetes and cognitive issues. He also had to sell his Super Bowl ring and subsist below the poverty line on Social Security checks. His old Bears coach, Mike Ditka, told SI, "It's tragic. I think he's given up. And the question in my mind is, why?" There's no easy exit strategy from the fight game, something Evander Holyfield found out the hard way. Despite earning what the BBC estimates to be $230 million over his career, including a $33 million purse for fighting a famously violent Mike Tyson.
I'm sorry, Evander. It's your ear.
Holyfield has spent a decade battling financial collapse. With a lavish lifestyle that saw him a regular in the casinos of Vegas and Atlantic City, and having 11 children by 5 different women, Holyfield found that even a fortune can disappear when everyone's coming for it. From the heights of Olympic glory and heavyweight championships, ESPN reported that Holyfield found himself unable to pay $3,000 alimony checks. His house was foreclosed on, and all his sports memorabilia was put up for auction. This massive debt forced the pugilist to hold on long past his expiration date, fighting and losing matches into his 50s. In 2012, Holyfield told The Independent, "These are difficult days. Dealing with all the mothers of all my kids. There ain't no winning here, man. No winning at all. I've had no money to pay lawyers and had to fight on my own in court, and that ain't easy." He finally retired in 2014 at the age of 51. Cleveland Browns legend Bernie Kosar was an all-pro superstar who earned millions over the course of his career. And yet, according to court documents, when he filed for bankruptcy in 2009, he had amassed millions in debt, and his checking account had all of $44 in it.
You once told me that you've had $300 million and you've had zero.
Yep.
How is that possible?
Kosar told the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette that financial advisors mismanaged his money and too many people came looking for handouts. He estimates he gave out over 8 figures to ex-teammates, plus another 8 figures to friends and family without ever seeing a dime repaid. And according to the ESPN documentary Broke, Kosar's own father siphoned off a fortune for mortgages and car payments. As a result, Kosar at one point owed millions to both his ex-wife and his ex-team.
I'm really good at making it, good at spending it, great at giving it away.
Over the course of his all-star NBA career, Antoine Walker earned over $110 million. But just 2 years after he retired in 2008, Walker declared bankruptcy. Besides a number of bad business investments, Walker blew his fortune on clothes and cars. According to the Las Vegas Sun, it got so bad that Walker was convicted of passing bad checks to casinos in 2010. A plea agreement kept him out of jail and served as a wake-up call. Nowadays, Walker works as a consultant for Morgan Stanley, advising young athletes on what not to do with their money, a topic he's an expert in. He told CNN Money, "I thought I was set for the rest of my life. My story is sad. It's sad to see other guys work so hard throughout their life, and then they just lose it."
I want to share those things, but also tell my story so people can see it as a learning example.
For 80s baseball icon Lenny Dykstra, retirement actually seemed like a good thing at first, as he turned a car wash franchise into an empire complete with a mansion and private jet. In 2009, though, he was forced to declare bankruptcy after a magazine startup went off the rails. And that was just the start of his legal trouble. In 2011, he was arrested for grand theft auto, possession of narcotics, federal bankruptcy fraud, and indecent exposure. By the end of the year, he was in jail. After being released in 2013, Dykstra told the New York Times, "I became addicted to money. Money was my drug."
Meatloaf was one of the world's most successful musicians, so how did he go broke at the height of his fame? Before Meatloaf, aka Marvin Lee Aday, was rock music's most warbly vibrato, he started off as a bouncer after leaving school and fleeing to Los Angeles in 1967. A self-proclaimed outcast, Meatloaf started his first band, Meatloaf Soul, around this time before finding kindred spirits in musical theater for his hammy, over-the-top performances. He landed a role in the show Hair, which went to Broadway, and from there worked on the Rocky Horror Picture Show, which defied the odds and went on to earn $112 million since its release. It was then that Meatloaf recorded one of history's all-time best-selling records, Bat Outta Hell. Released in 1977, the record is the number 3 best-selling album of all time, at 43 million copies sold, beaten only by Michael Jackson's Thriller and AC/DC's Back in Black. It stayed at number 1 for almost 400 weeks straight and consistently sold hundreds of thousands of copies every year in the time since its release. So how is it possible that in 1983, a mere 6 years after its release, Meatloaf filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy? As Meatloaf himself said in his autobiography, "As Bat got bigger, I got crazier. It was like some terrible curse where everything I'd ever wished for turned into a nightmare, and it was rapidly turning me into a maniac." He discovered cocaine, and as he started falling apart, his relationship with his musical partner Jim Steinman disintegrated. Meatloaf saw himself as the actor, with Steinman as the playwright, and the two had collaborated to bring Bat Outta Hell to light. But things went downhill from 1978 to 1984, when Meatloaf lost Steinman, strained his voice, experienced severe depression, and was finally sued by Steinman over the rights to their music. The legal battle added up to a whopping 45 lawsuits worth $80 million in total. Facing financial pressure, the only choice Meatloaf had was to file for bankruptcy. Meatloaf and Steinman would eventually reconcile and come back together for 1993's Bat Outta Hell 2, Back into Hell, which contained the mega-hit opera rock anthem I'd Do Anything for Love, But I Won't Do That. Though the two reconciled professionally, the lawsuits delayed the delivery of all the royalties that Meatloaf was supposed to receive from his record sales. It wasn't until 1997 that the royalties finally made their way to him. Riding a wave of career rebirth, Meatloaf spent the 1990s clawing his way back to the top. While his appearance in the Spice Girls movie may not have been a real high point, he had roles and cameos in more critically acclaimed cinematic fare like 1992's Wayne's World and 1999's Fight Club. He also appeared at the beginning of Tenacious D and The Pick of Destiny, playing Jack Black's father, even belting out a few lines of the movie's opening song Kickapoo in 2006. Meanwhile, he still had a foot in the world of music and continued to put out albums and toured extensively. He released a series of albums including Bat Out of Hell 3 in 2006, Hang Cool Teddy Bear in 2010, and Hell in a Handbasket in 2011. All of this was accomplished in spite of chronic health issues that threatened to undo much of the work Meatloaf had done in an effort to rebuild his career. In 2003, Meatloaf collapsed on stage during a performance in London. Doctors subsequently diagnosed him with Wolff-Parkinson-White syndrome, which is known to cause an irregular heartbeat. In 2016, he collapsed on stage again, this time in Edmonton, Alberta. This time, his management released a statement chalking the health crisis up to dehydration. When the legend passed away on January 20, 2022, he was 74 years old. Meatloaf has a well-deserved place in music history, not just for what he accomplished as an artist, but for the major obstacles that he overcame along the way.
Disputes with the IRS, mounting debts, 6-foot-high piles of horse manure. Wayne Newton may be a Las Vegas icon, but he can no longer afford to live the high life like he once did. Here's how Newton really lost his money. Wayne Newton declared bankruptcy in 1992. Not only was he out of cash, but he was also $20 million in debt, an amount that included a $341,000 lien to the IRS for unpaid taxes. In 1997, Newton embarked on a new project. Newton and entertainer Tony Orlando opened the Talk of the Town together, which had 2,100 seats. But problems arose when shows were only pulling in between about 360 to 900 people per show, and this simply wasn't enough to pay off the building's $2 million lease. Then, a hidden recording device was discovered in a private room shared by Newton and Orlando, allegedly placed there by Newton to record conversations. Newton claimed he was just recording the show, and the audio was so poor that it was basically useless, but the damage had clearly been done. Newton said of Orlando, "I decided that I have never given up a friendship over money, but he did." The duo stopped performing together in 1998, and by 1999, Newton had renamed the location the Wayne Newton Theater. In 2000, the IRS claimed that Wayne Newton didn't report the sale of a $200,000 Arabian horse. The IRS said that Newton's wife, Catherine, failed to report income totaling almost $400,000 from 1999 and over $500,000 from 2000, which she made through Newton's businesses. Wayne Newton also reportedly overstated the wages for his employees and made other errors, leading to thousands of dollars in fines, alongside the hundreds of thousands he already owed. One of Newton's lawyers countered the IRS claim, saying, "We believe the IRS owes him money." Wayne Newton embarked on a new project in 2001, turning Casa de Shenandoah, his main residence, into a Graceland type of tourist site.
Welcome. This is the Casa de Shenandoah. My name is Wayne Newton, and this is my home.
He partnered with a company called CSD, which planned to turn his 40-acre property into a museum, car wash, and dinner theater venue dedicated to Newton fans. CSD invested $50 million into the project and paid Newton $19.5 million. Wayne Newton was sued by the IRS in 2005 after he failed to pay $1.8 million on a house he had sold. Despite the infusion of cash from his CSD deal, Newton was still struggling to keep up with his lavish lifestyle. In 2007, Newton reportedly abandoned a jet at Oakland International Airport because, according to employees, the jet was rotting and too expensive to repair. He waited 3 years to have the plane disassembled and shipped to his Las Vegas home. Then, in a bizarre twist, he reassembled it in his backyard, where it was visible from the street. Wayne Newton had another financially difficult year in 2010. He was sued by a former friend, O. Bruton Smith, who had loaned him $3.35 million, which Newton failed to repay in time. To pay back the loan, Smith attempted to foreclose Newton's property, Casa de Shenandoah. On top of that, Newton was also forced to pay an almost $500,000 debt to his former pilot in 2010. In 2012, Newton was sued over the sale of his property to CSD. After 11 years and $50 million invested, Newton and his family hadn't left the property or turned over any of his personal items for CSD to display on the future museum site. There were lots of outlandish aspects to this lawsuit, too. According to ABC News, Newton reportedly left hundreds of tons of horse manure in 6-foot piles around the estate. Furthermore, as ABC News reported, Newton's horse stables were allegedly full of urine that was so potent that it made breathing unbearable. According to ABC News, Wayne Newton's other animals, like penguins and wallabies, were also poorly cared for and surrounded by filth at Casa de Shenandoah. CSD workers claim that Newton would not control his violent dogs, resulting in the workers getting bitten and scrambling onto car rooftops and into trees to avoid getting attacked. And other CSD workers filed sexual harassment claims against Newton, saying he gave them wet, sloppy, and disgusting kisses, according to ABC News. The lawsuit claimed that Newton took $19.5 million without ever planning to leave Shenandoah. The same year, a bankruptcy judge ordered that Casa de Shenandoah be put up for sale, estimating it was worth about $50 million. Newton told the Las Vegas Sun, "By the time we got to the point of leaving, I had enough of the toll it was taking on my family. I will never back down from a fight, but when we left Shenandoah, I was just relieved." Casa de Shenandoah eventually went up for sale, first for $70 million in 2013, then $30 million in 2014. In the meantime, the Newton family and their horde of animals moved to a pair of houses worth a combined $5 million. Newton connected with a Casa de Shenandoah representative, who offered to work something out with him so he could move back to Shenandoah, and by 2015, the family had returned. Shenandoah welcomed tourists to see Newton memorabilia, animals, and the famed property. But Wayne Newton's money woes were far from over. In 2018, Casa de Shenandoah stopped its tours in order to perform renovations. It has not reopened to the public since then. So how is famed singer Wayne Newton making a living today? Since 2020, he has partnered with the Caesars Palace Casino and notably made a commercial during the COVID-19 pandemic, encouraging people to visit the casino.
We've missed the nightlife, but most of all, we've missed you.
Newton was also supposed to make a return to the stage in 2021, but was stopped by a back injury. As of 2022, however, Wayne Newton is back to performing cabaret shows in Las Vegas in a show called Wayne Up Close and Personal. Mr. Las Vegas reportedly sings, shares stories, and invites the audience to ask him questions during shows. Will the new gigs fix his financial woes? Who knows?
Considering he's been a music icon for decades, you wouldn't expect Billy Joel to have to worry about his finances. But at one point, Joel nearly went broke, and it wasn't because he was spending a fortune trying to woo an uptown girl. Keeping track of millions of dollars can't be easy, which is why the rich and famous hire managers and financial advisors to keep track of their fortune. The key to financial success as a celebrity is trusting the right people and knowing exactly where and who your money is going to. But even the most successful entertainers can run into trouble if they trust the wrong person. And that's exactly what happened to the Piano Man. In 1989, Joel sued his former manager Frank Weber for $90 million for fraud and breach of financial duty. The 83-page suit alleged that, among other things, Weber spent millions of Joel's dollars investing in Weber's own businesses and also doled out $2.5 million in loans to oil and gas tax shelters, horse breeding farms, real estate partnerships, and other businesses controlled by Weber. According to People, Weber's fraudulent activities also included a hotel development where Weber invested Joel's money and subsequently made Joel liable for potential losses. Amazingly, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to accusations. The suit stated that Weber double-billed Joel for his music videos and cheated expenses, such as travel and accounting fees. It was further alleged that Weber crafted false financial statements which failed to show the musician's true finances. And he wasn't done. Weber also allegedly mortgaged the artist's copyrights for $15 million without telling Joel. Oh, and during all this, Weber also pocketed up to $20 million in commissions. So why did Weber sink his claws so deep into Joel? Family. Weber was once Joel's brother-in-law, as Weber's sister Elizabeth was both Joel's wife and manager. When Joel and Elizabeth divorced so he could get with Christy Brinkley, though, Joel instead hired her brother as his new manager. Whoops! Billy Joel, a definitive biography, quotes Joel as saying, "I hooked up with the Borgias. What a family to pick." From the total amount of damages sought in the lawsuit, $30 million was for, quote, compensatory damage, which Weber had allegedly taken from the musician. The leftover $60 million was for punitive damages for the years that the manager had allegedly defrauded the Piano Man. According to the Los Angeles Times, Joel began a private investigation of Weber in the summer of 1989, in which his attorneys reviewed his financial statements and even hired an independent accounting firm to do an investigative audit of Frank Management, Weber's company. According to People, Weber was promptly fired due to findings from the investigation. Joel's attorney, Leonard Marks, said the investigation, quote, revealed major incidents of fraud and dishonest dealings, virtually from the inception of their contract. Oh, and that contract actually gave Weber power of attorney. Mark said the abuse was among the worst he had seen. He told People, often a manager will let the power that comes from associating with a megastar go to his head. It can lead to all kinds of abuse. Of course, Weber and his attorneys had a totally different take on things. His lawyer, Daniel Gecker, insisted that Weber always had Joel's consent. Gecker told People, "This whole thing is an effort to avoid paying Frank royalties on the upcoming LP and tour, which are due under the management contract. The only grounds upon which the contract can be broken are to claim fraud, hence these accusations." So what ended up happening? Joel didn't get the $90 million, or anything close to it. According to Fox Business, the party settled out of court. Joel received $8 million, and Weber declared bankruptcy. Weber later countersued for $30 million, but the case was dismissed.
Don't you ever besmirch Billy Joel.
So the next time you see the Piano Man, consider leaving a little something extra in his tip jar. He just might need it.
Sinbad has been many things to many people. An acclaimed comedian, the security detail to the first kid of these glorious United States, the guy who lost Star Search to the voice of the Crypt Keeper. But a few years ago, Sinbad became something else that was a lot less fun: bankrupt. Yes, the one-time superstar filed for bankruptcy in 2009. And when that was dismissed due to a clerical error, he filed again in 2013. At the time, he told the court that he was a whopping $11 million in debt. So how did he get in such trouble? Well, according to News One, roughly $8 million of the comedian's debt came in the form of back taxes. The rest of it, though, apparently boils down to old-fashioned American optimism. Speaking to the Huffington Post on the subject of his bankruptcy cases in 2013, Sinbad described working in the entertainment industry in terms that any gig employee with a credit card can understand. "I spent money and I kept thinking, I get one more movie and I'll wipe these bills out. But that movie never came. So you owe $1 million. I can pay that. Okay, fines, fees, now you owe $2.5 million. But I didn't do nothing. Now you owe $4 million. He went on to explain that this happened despite the fact that, unlike, say, Nicolas Cage, he wasn't blowing his fortune on extravagant purchases like haunted mansions or dinosaur skeletons. And his court filings seemed to bear this out, as at the time, he only listed $131,000 in personal assets.
I didn't buy Bentleys. I never lived large. I believed in me, I invested in me, and I invested in a lot of other people. I would not change it. I would not go back.
Another factor in his financial woes was declining health. The older you get, the bigger the medical bills get. And Sinbad, now 63, has had his fair share of top-shelf medical problems over the years. In the 1970s, the 6'5" comic had planned to play professional hoops and even earned a basketball scholarship to the University of Denver, but a knee injury sidelined the aspiring athlete. Joint damage, as you're probably aware, is the student loans officer of the medical world. It always catches up with you in the end. By the late 2000s, a large frame and an active lifestyle had finally taken their toll. In August of 2010, the comedian revealed in a Twitter post that he'd undergone the second of 2 knee replacement surgeries, the first of which he'd discussed at some length in his special from earlier that year, Where You Been? Then, in November of 2015, UPI reported that Sinbad was recovering from spinal fusion surgery, a complicated procedure in which 2 or more vertebrae are welded together. The process reportedly lasted 10 hours. He later tweeted, "Thank everyone for their prayers. I shall be back up soon. This surgery was no joke."
You haven't changed a bit from how you look good.
I've changed.
We've grown up watching you.
I got more metal in my body. I can't go through any kind of detectors.
Besides the cost of those medical bills, the physical woes also certainly affected his ability to work, further lowering his income. Luckily, it seems as though the worst of it is now in the past for Sinbad. In 2013 and 2014, he had a recurring voice role on cult favorite cartoon show Steven Universe playing Mr. Smiley, the Beach City Funland mainstay and in a mega twist, ex-comedian. Then in 2017, he showed up on the Disney Junior animated series The Lion Guard as Uroho the Baboon, a part that lasted 2 episodes. In 2018, he returned to Fox, the network that aired the single season of The Sinbad Show in 1993, for the live-action sitcom Rel starring Lil Rel Howery. The show made it 12 episodes before being canceled in April of 2019. And in 2020, he was out on the road, maintaining a tour schedule that would make any comedian jealous, pandemic or no pandemic. One thing he probably won't be doing anytime soon, though, is working for Donald Trump. Back in 2010, he was fired by the Donald after just 2 episodes on The Celebrity Apprentice. He told Oprah in 2013 that he wishes he hadn't done the show. And if he could go back, he would tell Trump to fire his barber instead.
I'm sorry. I ain't feeling you, man. You're fired. I fire you, Donald Trump.
Still, it seems Sinbad has had the last laugh, because despite all his financial problems, Celebrity Net Worth estimates the value of his personal wealth now at roughly $4 million. Way to go, Sinbad.